If you plan to invite friends over for coffee, or you're thinking about snacks for coffee at work, please don't always rely on the old standby of a box of a dozen glazed donuts from Dunkin'. A lot of people are trying to get away from eating all of that like intensely sweet stuff all the time. And if they have cream and sugar in their coffee, like I do, maybe you do, something savory is gonna complement that and contrast with that a lot better. So I'm gonna show you how I make my savory turnovers. You can get very flexible with the fillings, and these just go great with coffee, I think, mid-morning coffee. So for the dough, you're gonna need 2 to 2¼ cups of all-purpose flour. You're gonna need an 8-ounce brick of cream cheese and 1 stick of butter. And then, for our fillings, we're going to need eggs. I'm using 4 eggs here. The mushrooms, Eric offered to make us all mushroom Swiss burgers because Publix had buy one, get one containers of mushrooms. And I had half of 1 container of portobello mushrooms left over, so I chopped those up, rough chop, about a half of a container's worth. I also have everything bagel seasoning. If you already have like sesame seeds, you can use those. I find that the Badia bagel seasoning is such a great value because it includes white sesame seeds, black sesame seeds, garlic flakes, onion flakes, and it just looks really nice. It's nice and cheap. Salt and pepper, better than bouillon, which is technically optional because we use a little bit. If you don't use it, you're missing out in your household. It will totally replace chicken stock. It tastes great, adds a lot of depth of flavor. You're going to want about 2 to 3 ounces of sour cream. This is an 8-ounce container of sour cream, so just to give you an idea, I've divided this recipe way down, like I've quartered it from what I usually make. You'll need dried ground thyme. I'm using 1/2 of 1 white onion that I'm going to dice up. And then we're also using white vinegar, just a splash, like maybe a teaspoon-ish. I'll have to go by taste. If you don't have white vinegar, you can use white wine. I hope you all have a giant jug of white vinegar in your house. It has so many applications for cooking and cleaning, natural cleaning. As for the fat or the oil that we're gonna cook all of this in, you can do what I did, which is I used about 2 teaspoons of bacon fat. Every time that you are, I forgot to say I also used Swiss cheese. I only had about 3 slices of Swiss cheese from when Eric made our mushroom Swiss burgers. You really don't need a lot of cheese. There's a lot of fat in here, so you don't need much. So as I was saying, you can use bacon fat. Anytime you cook bacon, please don't discard the oil, the fat that drips out. Save that. Anytime that you're cooking beef and you have beef drippings, save those. That's flavor, and you can cook with that later. If you don't have that, you can absolutely use vegetable oil. You see I have like a big old can of canola oil cooking spray, just to spray your pan liberally for your onions, and so that they will start to kind of caramelize. But like I said, I'm going to use some bacon fat here. So we're going to start first by making our dough. And as I said, that is 2 to 2¼ cups of flour, along with just sticking in the softened brick of cream cheese and the softened room temperature butter. That's going to go into our stand mixer. I don't recommend making this dough by hand. It's just so fatty that if your warm hands, even gloved with kitchen food service gloves, if you try to touch it, it's gonna like separate. So you really do want to use a stand mixer. I put this bowl into the refrigerator before mixing it just to make sure nothing separates. It's a very fatty dough. If you use the paddle attachment as I did here instead of the dough hook, which that's a dough hook, you'll get it mixed faster, but you're going to have to stop just a couple of times. It takes about a minute to a minute and a half on a very low speed, the lowest possible speed for this dough to come together. So you'll have to stop and use a spatula and kind of like move the dough off of the paddle attachment. Now, as I said, 2 to 2¼ cups. You're going to kind of have to feel it out and determine how much flour your dough is going to need to come together as a solid dough. The amount of fat, the percentage of fat in your butter is going to make a difference. So, you may need to go on the high end to the full 2¼ cups. The lightest sprinkle of flour on this bowl is going to enable me with impeccably clean and dried fingers to rub the sides of the bowl and then get all of that residue off and add the last little bit of residue, which is still dough, to my ball of dough, and now my bowl looks a lot cleaner. It's going to be a lot easier to wash. I think I took like half of a teaspoon to do that. All right, so as I said, I put in about a teaspoon of bacon drippings fat into my pan. I let it heat up. My pan is currently on a low to low medium heat. I don't want to burn my onions. I do want them to turn golden and kind of caramelize. And this step will probably take about 3 to 4 minutes, which I'm not going to show you the whole thing. But if you watched other videos of mine, you may remember me saying that a lot of people who learn cooking from social media don't really have a good sense of how long certain things take, because social media is so heavily curated and cut for content. So it can be hard to tell, like, okay, how long does something actually take? Now, you see those bubbles. That's because the onions were starting to release more of their water. They were just starting to turn golden. Our mushrooms are also going to release more water. Fun fact, you really don't have to worry about overcooking mushrooms. Unlike other things, they're really never going to overcook. Almost. There's like some cool scientific studies from, was it Test Kitchen? I can't remember. All right, so as you saw, I put in a tiny little, like maybe an 1/8 of a teaspoon of Better Than Bouillon, that paste. It's really so good. If you have not used it, please use it. Great depth of flavor. I also am going to add about a total of a teaspoon maybe of thyme. Ground dried thyme. These are such simple flavors. I can't tell you how phenomenally good this tasted, considering that the ingredients were so simple. Of course, there's a lot of fat in it. So, fat obviously delivers the flavor, but thyme is a really great addition here. But it's so simple. Salt, pepper, a little Better Than Bouillon, and some thyme. All right, we're getting a lot of nice color on our onions. as you see here. So at this point, I really do want my heat on low. I think I said I was going to use 4 eggs. I used three well beaten eggs. And I'm going to use my spatula and just kind of move this around. I forgot to say, I didn't show this, but before I put my eggs in, I did lightly salt and pepper my onions and my mushrooms. I don't really understand the science behind it, but you really do need to season every layer of your food. You don't want to wait until cooking is over and then test for seasoning, especially salt and pepper. Every layer ideally will be seasoned. So it tasted good when I checked my mushrooms and onions. It's gonna need more salt now that I've added 3 whole eggs. At this point, I'm not sure why I turned my phone upside down, but at this point, I turned off my heat and I added 2 very thin slices of that Swiss cheese. You really don't need a whole lot in here. I'm just mixing it to break up the cheese. I kind of tore it up, shredded it up a little bit by hand. All right. I am now I've now put the heat onto low, and I'm looking at my filling, and I'm going to add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of flour to help kind of coat all of these ingredients and suck up some of the excess fat and oil. If we didn't do this, what would happen is our filling would just kind of ooze out of our dough. We don't want that. So I had that on low heat. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle about a teaspoon of vinegar on here. Vinegar is acid. Anytime you're adding acid to savory food, it's like a delivery system for the seasonings, for the flavors. So I encourage you to taste test this before and after you add your 1 teaspoon of sprinkled all over vinegar. That way you can really understand what vinegar is doing for your food. The heat is definitely on low here. I mentioned a variation. There's a lot of different fillings that you can do with this dough. Okay, I had added about 1 tablespoon before. Here's my 2nd tablespoon of flour that's going in. I forgot to tell you before that my dough did need to be chilled. I should have said that to you. Probably will do best if it chills for about an hour at least, but you could also chill it overnight. Once this mix cools, you could also chill that overnight and then just assemble your turnovers the next day. Another filling that I've done here is the Jimmy Dean sage seasoned sausage, like the tube that you can find at the store, or Jimmy Dean sage sausage. Try that with, after that cooks, a little bit of scrambled eggs, or even potatoes. I'm sure you've seen in your frozen section, you have, like in the breakfast section, they have like those already cooked diced potatoes in the freezer section. Try tossing those in after you have already cooked some of that Jimmy Dean sausage. That will be really, really good. I've done that several times. And it's great. A lot of people who are having coffee at the office, they didn't have breakfast this morning. You'd be amazed how many people do not have themselves together. They wanted to have breakfast. It's not that they're intermittent fasting. They just didn't have breakfast. So this is a really nice way to give them like a mini breakfast. All right, so I only have about 2.5 ounces of this, what was total 8 ounces of sour cream. Anyway, that's going to go in. Once the pan was off of the heat completely, because we don't want the sour cream to separate in our ingredients, but we'll mix that up together. We can let that cool to room temperature completely, or we can put it in the fridge up to overnight before we start to assemble our dough, or I should say our turnovers. Now, these are Silpat mats, and they're great for rolling out dough. As you see, I have my stainless steel roller here. I have a 4-inch cutter. It's not a cookie cutter, it's just my tali container. Repurposing things, right? Now, our all-purpose flour will make an appearance again here. And we're going to need 2 eggs for this. And this is where our everything bagel seasoning will be used. Now, if you're very fast at this, you will not need to refrigerate the dough in parts. But if you're still new at it, I encourage you to cut this dough into halves. Just work on one piece at a time. You're going to roll out with your stainless steel roller these dough circles out to about 1/8 of an inch thickness. If you're using a 4-inch cutter like I am, you will get 15 rounds out of this, along with just a little scrap left over there so that you can patch up any tears or holes in your turnovers. This dough will stick because there's so much fat from the butter and the cream cheese in it. So make sure that your air conditioning is on, or that you do this on a cold winter day. You really want to try to handle the dough as little as possible. Let your stainless steel rolling pin do the work. You could even put your rolling pin into the freezer or the refrigerator. In between rolling, you can gently dust each round that you make with a little bit of flour so that it won't stick to the one that you put on top of it as you cut. You really do want to move fast. Before you start sealing any of these up, divide the filling between them, and that way you won't get to the end and find out you have way too much or way too little filling. So these can be assembled immediately and cooked immediately, or you can just assemble them and you can keep them in the fridge overnight, covered in a container, which is what I did. It's the next morning. I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take those 2 eggs and I put just a splash, like a teaspoon's worth of water, into these 2 beaten eggs in this bowl. I'm going to use that fork to hold and dip each of these turnovers into the egg wash mixture, and then I'll sprinkle the everything bagel seasoning on top of that. By the way, everything bagel seasoning is a great topping for a lot of Chinese foods. So you might say, bagel seasoning? That sounds crazy, but what is bagel seasoning? It's white sesame seeds, black sesame seeds, onion flakes, garlic powder. So if that's what you're topping some dish with, along with some, scallions, why not? And you're going to end up paying way less than if you bought all that stuff separately. So these went into my oven at 400 degrees. It ended up taking about 20 minutes. Really try to make sure that these do not touch, because they will stick to each other thanks to the egg wash. They will not stick, however, to the Silpat mat, which is great. So here they are. They are somehow crispy on the edges, but then also soft, and the filling is really, really good. People do fight over these. You can absolutely double or quadruple up on this recipe to make them for a crowd. There are a few steps, but it's really, really easy. It's a great make-ahead thing. As you saw, you can totally put the filling, make the filling the day before, make the dough the day before. You could make the dough and the filling 2 days before, and then assemble them the day before, and then just bake them off the morning that you want them. Just pop them in the oven. I hope that you try these. Take care.